Peace everyone, Unmasked here, and welcome to my voiceover tutorial for my Jaguar drawing. In this video, I will take you through my process for creating this piece. It's pretty long, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so I already have my initial sketch down, so I have the picture laid out exactly the way that I want it, and I'm going to be starting on the background. The first color that I'm using here is the Luminance pencil number 470. I will be using Luminance pencils for this entire coloring process, so I'll be referring to all those colors. I will also have all the colors listed in the description based on the part of the drawing that I'm using them. For the background, I used 6 colors, and before I even started with the background, I established my color palette. I have a couple tutorials on coloring, and specifically a tutorial on how to color everything. And I go through in detail how I create my color palettes when I'm doing a piece, and I did exactly what I described in that video to choose my colors for the background here. Now, my process for this is to start with my lighter colors, and I started with that light green, number 470, and then I went to 002 to fill in some of the white space, and then now I'm working with pencil 182 to just kind of block in a little bit of the shapes that I see in my reference photo. Being really loose with the pencil strokes, I'm not really concerned with my pencil strokes showing through at this point because I'll be putting multiple layers on this piece. Now you see me blending it out a little bit, and the reason I'm blending it so early is because these lighter colors, I want them to stay light, and I don't want them to bleed out later when I do more layering. So by blending them out now, I'm kind of letting the paper absorb the pigment a little bit, and that way they won't be so blendable when I add additional layers. So they'll kind of just stay there, and it's sort of a way of protecting the colors. I'm just using odorless mineral spirits to blend this out, nothing fancy. And I'm using a number 8 round brush. The reason I like to use the round brush is because it gives me a lot of control. I can do fine detail as well as blending out larger areas, and it works quite well. The paper that I'm using for this drawing is a Stonehenge vellum paper, and I really like this paper for colored pencil especially. I use this paper exclusively for colored pencil. One of the reasons is it takes ink really well, and I do a lot of inking in drawings, and for colored pencil, the smooth surface is perfect for blending with mineral spirits because since the paper is smoother, it has less texture, and it doesn't require as much layering because you can smooth out the pigments with a brush easier than if you were to use a thicker, more dense paper or a watercolor paper that is more absorbent. The smoother texture also helps blend the dark and light colors, and as you can see here, I've started adding my 4th color to the background, and this color is 225. And here I'm being a little bit more careful with my pencil strokes. I'm doing small circles, and when you get to the darker colors, you want to be a little bit more careful with your pencil strokes because in order to blend those out, you don't want it to make very clear pencil strokes. And I'm not using a very hard pressure with my pencil. Basically, I'm using just the weight of the pencil in my hand holding it. So you can do this whole background without your hand hurting. Now I'm going back through with the colorless or the odorless mineral spirits to blend that out. And you can see that I'm avoiding the highlight spots because I don't want this color bleeding over top of my highlights. I'm staying in between the highlights, and I'm kind of just rubbing it into itself, and letting the blender kind of bleed itself into the paper as it absorbs. And now you can see that I switched pencils and I'm working with my 5th color, and this color is 739. It's kind of a dark turquoise color. And now I'm going in, I'm really doing some of the darker valued shapes that I see in my reference photo. And again, I'm being very careful with my pencil strokes, making small circles, because when you blend this out, you want to be able to get rid of those pencil strokes. And since this paper is so smooth, it's pretty easy to get rid of them. So you don't have to be too conscious of your pencil strokes, which is what I really like about this paper. You can get the smooth, creamy backgrounds that you want with pretty much no effort at all. And my overall process for the background is to start with my light colors and then go to my dark colors, and then I go from my dark colors back to my light colors. And the reason I like that process is because I can establish my highlights and then establish my shadows and then reinforce my highlights. And when you blend out each layer, like I said, it gets harder to blend them a second time. So when you add another layer, the colors don't bleed over top of one another so much so that you lose your highlights. And you can see here, I'm starting to blend out that darker tone. And I only have one more color to add to the background. The darkest color that I'll be adding is number 407, and it's a really rich dark brown color. I avoided using black in my background, partly because there's no black in the background in my reference photo. Even though it may look black, if you analyze the photograph, or if you analyze your reference photo closely enough, you'll notice that white and black don't really occur. They rarely occur in photographs, and they almost never occur in nature. So that's one of the reasons that I avoided using black, even though the shadows were quite dark. I think that with the mix of the dark turquoise and the dark brown, it got the shadows dark enough to create the effect that I needed in order to enforce the lighting. And as you can see, I'm blending out that darker turquoise color, and up in the portion that I'm at right now, I'm just kind of dabbing it and letting the paint thinner kind of just soak into the paper and spread that pigment out on its own. I'm not really brushing it, I'm just dabbing it with a little bit of the liquid. Because I want to soften the edges, but I don't want to smear that pigment over my highlights. And I'm just finishing up the bottom right corner now. And then I'm going to go through and add my darkest color and really get those deep shadows with the dark brown. And here I'm adding a little bit of my mid-range green. This is my 225 color. And I'm just going in and adding a little bit of saturation to those darker shadowed areas because I don't want to lose all of my color. And so I'm just adding a little bit to the darker spots. Now I'm going back and I'm getting rid of the white. I don't want any of my paper white, so I'm going back through with my light 002 color. It's kind of like a smoky brown, a smoky blue, light blue color. And yeah, I just covered up the white, and then now I'm going back through and just touching up my shadows, getting them a little bit darker, and I'm blending out that 225 color, and I'm just going through and trying to smooth out the edges of each of the pencil strokes and each of the little shapes. The key here is to get all of the colors blended smoothly together. Now you can see that I've finally grabbed my dark brown color, and I'm really getting those dark spots at the bottom of the page there, and it's kind of hard to see what it's doing, but it makes a big difference. And I'm just blending that out now and smoothing out my pencil strokes. At this point, with 3-4 layers down, the pigment of the pencils starts to become really smooth and really easy to blend out, and it starts to finally look like the way that I want it to. Now I'm taking my another mid-range green. This is the 182 color, and I'm just adding a little bit of detail, bringing out some texture and stuff in the shadows, something that might be a rock or a tree branch or something like that. And I'm just adding a little bit of detail here and there. And here's that 002 color again, just hitting some of the whites and the highlights, and just adding a teeny tiny little shapes to the back, just to kind of give it that realistic texture. And again, I'm covering up all the white that I see, and I'm being really loose with this color, especially in the top right, because I'm kind of covering all of the colors. Since they're already blended, it doesn't really, it's not really going to affect those colors once I blend it over. And you can see I'm just kind of like brushing the whole page, and I'm not losing those highlights because they've already been established. And once I do that, I go back to another mid-range color, and I start adding a little bit more depth to the upper portion, the lighted area, and doing small shapes. I'm actually just doing kind of squiggly lines, because the paper's so smooth, and I'm working on my 3rd, 4th layer. These pencil strokes are going to be really easy to blend out. And the final thing that I do is I take that light color and I kind of just throw it all over the top, and then I blend it out. And this creates kind of like a foggy effect. And I'm taking my brush strokes and I'm taking it from the top down to the bottom left, and that's creating kind of a sun ray effect with the light gray color. And that will be it for the background. Now I will be moving on to the log in the foreground, and that will get a little bit more interesting. All right, now moving on to the log, I'm just doing a little bit of the part that's in the back. It's pretty blurry, so I'm not really adding a lot of detail to it. One of the really important things that I start from the very beginning with this log is I focus all of my pencil strokes in the direction of the texture of the log. So you can see right from the beginning, I'm doing all of my pencil strokes the direction that the log is actually growing, and of the texture. And it's really important all the way from the beginning to do this. As subtle as it is in the beginning, later on, this is a very important quality to have, is building that texture from the very beginning. I'm just doing a little bit of blending here. I started off with a very light color, and basically it's the color of my highlight from the log itself. It's the brightest color. The sun is hitting the log from the left side, and you have the highlight on the left side of the log. So I started with color 802. And similar to the background, I used 6 colors for the background. I only used 7 colors for the log. and I used a couple of the same colors. So the same colors from the background I did for the log. Now you can see here that I'm adding a little bit of texture with a darker color. This would be a 508 color that I'm using to create those shadows and establish a little bit of the texture. And all I'm doing is creating little dots, because from my reference photo, the log's texture is kind of like a lot of little pits, kind of like an ant, like army ants or whatever, termites got a log and started eating it or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, going through and I'm adding a little bit of my green, and this is the same green that I used in the background because there's a little bit of moss on this log. And now I'm going through and I'm blending out some of that texture just to get the right color and tone for the log. And I'm going through and adding more dots, more texture. There's a lot of dots. I create a lot of dots on this log, and there's really no rhyme or reason for the way that I'm doing it. I'm kind of just pushing the pencil on there. And now I'm going through with a little bit of the shadow color and adding some lines, just a little bit, and adding some of the darker spots, black spots on the log, and kind of just trying to continue to get that texture by adding dots over and over again. Like I said, just a bunch of dots. I get into a kind of a unique technique that I'll show in just a moment, but for the most part, I'm just adding dots, and I'm being very careful with my color choice. Just like the background, I want my colors to be exactly what I want them to be. So I established my color palette similar to what I did in the background, and now I'm going through with the lighter color, and I'm just adding a little bit of the highlight to it. At this point, it doesn't really look much like a log, but as I get in and I start adding those finer details, it starts to come to life. And now I'm going back through with a dark brown color. This color here is 866, and continuing to add more dots and more colors. All of my dots are very particular colors. I'm not guessing here. I'm very particular about the color choice to create the effect that I want. Also, since the log is growing, or it's laid down from the background to the foreground, the back of the log is a little bit out of focus, so you notice that I've kind of ignored that part of the log as far as adding dots. And you can see here my left hand got a little bored, so I grabbed two colors and I just started adding dots with both of them. You don't have to involve this technique in your piece. Kind of helps to be a little ambidextrous at times. But yeah, I switch pencils with my hands a little bit, just adding more and more dots. And that's pretty much it for this log. I go through and I blend out some of those darker spots, and I'm just dabbing it. I don't want to rub that texture out, so I'm literally just dabbing it with a little bit of the paint thinner. Now here's the interesting technique that I've used in a previous tutorial on how to color eyes. What I'm doing is I'm taking an X-Acto knife and I'm shaving off bits of my color into just teeny tiny little crumbs, and I'm just putting it all over the log. And here you can see I'm using a really light white color to really get those highlights, and taking my brush and I'm brushing off the excess. And then all I do is I take a spoon and I lightly press those shavings into the log to create even more texture. And the pressure that I'm using on the pencil is no more. I mean, the pressure that I'm using on the spoon is no more than what I would use on a pencil. I'm not pressing really hard because I don't want to damage the paper. All I want to do is press in those little pieces of pigment. And you can see here I chose a lighter white color, and this color is 002, to just get those highlights and press them in a little bit. And then I brush it off, and then I go back through with the darker tones, and I just I kind of erase those little excess spots that I didn't want pressed into the paper, and then I blend them out to just kind of make them go away and keep the spots that I want. And that's it for the log. All right, now we are moving on to the cat itself, and my color that I'm using right now is 662. You might be asking yourself why I'm making the spots blue. However, just like I've mentioned with the two previous parts of this drawing process, my color palette is very deliberate, and when you see the final piece, you can understand why I use blue. But basically, the highlights of the spot, the way the light is hitting the cat, is very, very blue. And I was kind of surprised by this. And by doing all the spots blue, I can get those highlights, and I can get the right tone, because this blue was just like the perfect blue that worked with this. So what I'm doing is I'm just blocking in all the spots of the cat, and right now I'm just working on the back of the cat, the back and the hind leg. And this part of the cat isn't as in focus as the face and the claws and things like that, because of the depth of field, similar to the log. So even though I'm paying close attention to my pencil strokes and making sure that they flow well with the direction that the hair is growing, I'm not being too careful, not just yet. Now, this is the part where I bring in black. Like, this is the actual black pencil, which is, what is it? It's 009 in the Luminance pencil set. And the reason I saved black for my main subject is because it's going to bring that extra contrast to the subject to make it stand off the page. So this is pretty much the only time that I would recommend using black, though I'm putting it on top of blue, so really it's turning it into a dark blue color. And I do start to blend out the spots a little bit, and I am being careful with my brush strokes. I am making sure that my brush strokes are in the direction of the fur every time. And I'm just going in and establishing those spots before I move on to any of the actual color of the fur. Just penciling in a little bit of the detail and doing a last bit of blending. Now I'm taking the lightest color and blocking in all of the highlighted part of the fur. And this is actually the same color that I used for the background. This is the 002 color. And it's still pretty blue. At this point, it almost looks like I'm coloring a snow leopard or something. But again, I'm being careful with my pencil strokes, but not too careful. I'm not trying to get any real detail in here. I'm just making sure that my pencil strokes are following the direction of the fur. And the end result here is that it looks like fur, but it looks like blurry fur. So this technique worked out really, really well with this process. And this part of the cat is actually quite bright, so there's really not a lot of color. Here I'm going in with a kind of a cream color. This color here is 832. It's a good skin tone color, actually, and it adds just the right tone to the fur. It's not too orange. It's more of a sandy color. And I'm just going in again, being conscious of my pencil strokes in the right direction. And now I switch to a little bit darker orange color. This is color 876. And I'm getting those colors, those richer colors into the cat. And you can see that my pencil strokes are are all the same direction of the fur. I'm just going in with another gray to establish a little bit of those darker shadows that you see in the fur. But like I said, most of this part of the cat is quite bright, and yeah, it was kind of difficult to do this part of the cat because I wanted it to look like a Jaguar, and it was kind of strange because there's so much blue going on in this part of the cat. And here I'm just going back with highlight color to reinforce those highlights, and a little bit of the orange colors to give it the tone, and just maintaining those same pencil strokes. And I'm following the shapes that I see in my reference photo as closely as possible, because if you notice the back paw, it doesn't really look like anything but a couple spots of black and stuff. But that's pretty much it for that back part of the cat. Adding a little bit more blue here to the shadows and to the spots, and always maintaining that same pencil stroke to create that fur effect. And then when I go and blend it out, making sure my brush strokes are in the same direction. This back part of the cat took me about 40 minutes to do. It was a pretty quick process. Here, I'm taking my black pencil and I'm making those spots a little bit more dark. Just adding a few last touches to it to really get that contrast and make that part of the cat stand out. And you see briefly that I use a brush. I'm always using a brush to clean off my work. I never wipe my work with my hand. One of the reasons is you have oil on your hand and it's not good for the paper. The other reason is your fingers will catch those little bits of colored pencil and just smear that pencil across your paper, and you can quickly ruin a piece by using your hand. I always use a brush. And now you can see I started adding the details on the face, and after I finished the back of the cat, I was pretty exhausted at this point. I drew this over the span of 3 days. I didn't do this in one sitting. Overall, it took about roughly 17 hours of combined time to color this. So not too much time. I've certainly spent longer times on other pieces. But here I'm just using black, and I'm just blocking in all the dark spots of the cat, and I'm being real careful to get the spots accurate. I didn't draw them perfectly accurate, but I drew them pretty well, and enough to where that when I was coloring it and looking at my reference photo, I could add the little changes necessary. And I'm just going through. No real technique here. I'm pressing a little hard on the paper, though. I will say that, and I'm at this point, I'm not really concerned about my pencil strokes, because on the face here, the fur is really, really short. So your pencil strokes with the spots, they didn't seem necessary to me. When I start to add color and it creates the real texture of the fur, that is when the pencil strokes are immensely important. But here with the spots, I'm just blocking them in. No special technique. This process took quite a while. I took a short break in between doing the back and doing the spots here. And once I finish up all the spots on the front of the cat here, I do the eyes. Eyes have always been kind of an easy subject for me to do. I do it pretty thoughtlessly. I'm not doing them too much here. I'm just kind of blocking in the pupils, but you can see here I switch back to the blue to get these spots on the left side, because this is where the light is hitting. And even though my reference photo doesn't have the bluish spots that I'm creating here, I wanted to add a little bit of intensity with the lighting. So this is kind of I'm kind of branching off from my reference photo, and I end up adding a lot of blue to this cat, especially in the shadows, and I think it really helps create a nice dynamic of color. This is a much cooler toned blue, which is really contrasting to the really warm green colors of the background, and I think it added really nice depth to the image. You can see I started blocking in a little bit of the paws. I would say the most difficult part of this drawing was the paws. Coloring the paws was probably the hardest part, because there's really no real shape to them. There's just a bunch of like what feels like random spots, and then like these claws just come out of nowhere. And so coloring them was quite a challenge. Yeah, there's not too much left to block in for the spots. Just have the left paw of the cat to block in, and then I will start on the start coloring the eyes, and I'll finish up this part by coloring the eyes, and then I'll get on to coloring the rest of the fur. I am adding a little bit of black underneath the paw here to separate it more starkly from the log, and I think that kind of helped lift the cat up off the log a little bit later on in the picture. And here I'm just blending out the spots. I don't want them to be as harsh as they were, so I'm just blending them out, making the edges a little bit less sharp, and that kind of helps soften them up a little bit. Just kind of dabbing it. I'm not rubbing it. I don't want to spread the color. Here you can see I started on the eyes, and I just made the eyes up. I didn't follow the reference photo at all. I used the colors from the background, bright greens. I used the gray to lighten them up a little bit, and then you'll see that I used the same technique that I did on the log to create kind of a unique texture in the eyes, kind of that foil look. So here you can see I added some highlights with the blue color. And then I go through and I add a little bit of the bright green, pressing it in with the spoon. Here's some blue. And that would be like the blue color of the sky. And I'm just using my X-Acto knife to like push around the pigment so I get it where I want. And here's that green, the green that I use for the highlights of the background. I'm getting that in there. It kind of gives that foil look that you see in cat eyes. And then the last thing that I do is I add a little bit of white to just highlight the bottoms, and then I scrape off a little bit of the white to create the highlights on the eyes. And this is really where the eyes come to life here at the end, when I add the white right here. Okay, so now I'm going to be starting on the main part of the subject. Up front, I'm going to start with my light color. This is that cream kind of bluish tone. This is the 002 color, and basically I'm just getting rid of all the white parts of the fur because I don't want any of the white paper showing through. So I'm getting the white parts done first. I like to work with the lighter parts, and even though it's the brightest part and it's not real noticeable, I am being very careful to make sure that my pencil strokes are still in the same direction. And I'm kind of holding the pencil a little strange, you might see in a couple spots here, and the reason is the flatter you hold the pencil, or the sharper the angle you make it towards the paper, the finer the line you can make. So that's what I'm doing there, creating real fine lines. And now I'm going through and adding a little bit more texture and a little bit more color with my orange color. this color here is the 876 color, the same color that I used on the back of the cat. And it's it's not too bright, it's not too much saturation, and just adding a little bit of texture and being careful with my pencil strokes. Nothing too special here. And now I'm just going through and blending that out to soften the lines just a little bit. I'm avoiding the face for now because I'm going to keep that till the very last, because that's really where I want all the focus to be, is on the face. Now I'm going through and working on the paws. The paws are pretty much the hardest part of this entire piece, because it's that real tricky piece that when you're drawing, they don't ever look like paws. Even if you follow your reference photo perfectly, they just look like kind of a random mess of detail. And when you look at the photograph, you see paws, but when you're during the drawing process, you almost don't see paws at all. You just kind of see a clump of weird details. And so the paws were pretty much the hardest part of this entire drawing. I was just going through adding the blue to the shadows and trying to be real careful with the details that I add there. And now I start on the other paw. I kind of do one at a time to just to build up the details slowly. And I'm paying really, really close attention to how my pencil strokes need to be based on the reference photo, and just trying to follow it as closely as possible. One of the things that I'm really, really avoiding on the paws is trying to make them look like paws based on my own perception of what paws should look like. I'm just ignoring my instincts completely and following my reference photo. I'm zoomed in pretty close on my reference photo so that everything else is kind of disappeared. So I'm not trying to do anything from my imagination. I'm just trying to find those fine details and then add them. I'm keeping my pencil really, really sharp because these details are quite small, and I'm just kind of going in and adding them slowly, finishing up on this left paw, and then I switch over to my orange color and I kind of add a little bit of tone to it and then blend it out and make it smooth. And then right after this, I switch and do the same thing on the other paw. Just wanted to work on one at a time. And if you look at that paw on the left, I mean, it really doesn't look like much. You can see the claws. I definitely bring those claws out by adding a nice sharp outline to them. But it doesn't really look like a paw. And it really doesn't start to look like paws until I finish up the rest of the part of the cat. Now I'm letting the paws dry a little bit. I don't want to try to do too much to them because the detail around them is missing. It doesn't make them look right. So now I switch to working on the main part, working on the chest of the cat. And you can see my pencil strokes here are very, very noticeable. And that's exactly what I want here. There's a lot of texture. There's a lot of fur. And I want to maintain that texture. So all of my pencil strokes are very deliberate on this part of the cat. And this is pretty much the darkest part of the cat. And you can see I'm using a lot of blue, probably much more blue than that's in my reference photo. I just really liked the way the blue was coming out. So I kind of used more of it than I may have normally would have. Now I'm starting to add a little bit of texture. and saturation to the fur. This is a new color that I add to the fur that doesn't appear on the back, and this is 069. It's a little bit darker brown red color. And one of the things, so there's two things that change from the background to the foreground to create depth and perception. One of them is contrast. So in the background, you'll have lighter colors. It won't be as dark. And then as you come forward, the colors get darker and darker and brighter. So in the background, there won't be pure white or pure black, but in the foreground, there might be pure black or pure white. And that creates a depth of field with contrast that's really important if you're working monochromatically. However, when you're working with colors, you have that contrast difference, but you also have saturation difference. So in the background, the colors are going to be more washed out. They're going to be a bit faded and less saturation. And so when you come forward, you want to increase your saturation. So that's one of the things that I did to really make this part of the cat stand out, is I added a new color, a richer orange color, and you can see it here as I blend it out, that color is redder. It's brighter than the orange that you see on the back of the cat. And this is how I created the effect that the depth of field effect, that the front of the cat is more in focus and closer to you. And you can see that it almost separates the shoulders from the back of the cat at this point. With the head and face still being white, it kind of sticks out a little bit more than I want it to. But after I do the face, everything kind of falls into place. Also, you can see that now I've completed the fur around the paws, that the paws look much more like you would imagine them to. So that's one of the important things. It's not trying to make things look the way you think they should, but the way they actually look. And you can see I just threw some of the colors on the nose. In the reference photo, the nose was pretty much just black, so I added a little bit of my own style to it by adding some of the oranges and reds to it. And you can see I start adding the texture. I start with the light color, similar to I did on the shoulders and stuff. And being really, really careful with my brush strokes here, with my pencil strokes, I mean. Then there's a lot of really fine detail in the nose. And so I spend a lot of time there on the nose. And depending on the part of the face that I'm working, my pencil strokes, they become shorter or longer. And on the nose, they're really, really short, but they're not dots. They're just like the smallest little pencil stroke. So that's what I'm doing there. And all around the face, the pencil strokes slowly get longer and longer as you get further and further away from the nose. And that creates like the effect that the hair on the nose is really short, but as it gets farther away, the hair gets a little bit longer. And again, just like I've been doing in the entire piece, my color palette was well established before I started on the face or started on the fur. I wasn't ever searching for colors. I knew exactly what colors I was using and when I was using them. And that's one of the things that made this piece so easy for me to do. On a challenge scale from 1 to 10, I would probably put this piece around a 7, a solid 7. For challenge-wise, it was surprisingly simple because I've established my color palette so well, and my pre-planning was done so well that the piece just kind of fell into my lap, and it just worked really, really well. Now I'm doing a little bit of the ears, a little bit longer pencil strokes because the fur growing out of the ears and stuff like that is much longer, and you can see that effect works really well. Here I'm just adding more color to the face. Really short pencil strokes. Most of the fur here up in the forehead and eyebrow area is pretty short, so the pencil strokes are pretty short. I'm just kind of throwing the color in there. This is the lighter toned orange color, so not too much here, just covering up the white spots, getting that color in there. Now when I'm blending these colors out, I do try to avoid the black spots. I don't want to spread that out too much, so you can see that when I do blend it, it's much more spotty. It's kind of just dabbing it and softening them a little bit. I don't want to blend it all together. I want to keep these colors separated the best that I can. Getting some of those darker colors there on the forehead to create the shadow, and when I blend it out, it will kind of come together. And you can see I went back there and added a little bit of blue. This color here, this is more blue that I'm adding, darker blue. And then here you can see I'm just dabbing it, just dabbing the brush because I don't want to move the details. I just want to blend them out, make them a little softer, and bring out that color saturation. Fur on the side of the face is really white, so I'm using some of that blue color, that light blue, and then I'm adding some of the shadows, just a little bit of the texture, getting in those darker spots, making sure I have my values correct. And this fur is pretty much done. I'm just going through adding more color, adding more saturation, and then going through and blending it out. It's pretty much done from this point. I'm going to go through and just touch up last few details of the fur. Make sure I get the maximum effect by using the correct pencil strokes, checking my values, making sure I get all the details and color that I want. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull out my white gel pen and add the finishing touches by adding the whiskers and things like that. Sharpening up the claws a little bit, adding those last teeny tiny little highlights to them. And I'm not even, at this point, I'm not even paying attention to my reference photo. I'm just creating the last little things that I want, just getting those really, really small details in the fur and on the nose. And you can see here the whiskers really bring this cat to life, really make this photo come to life at the end. Last little bit of details, and put a little bit in the ears, and that'll be it. So after adding the border to the image, here is the final piece. Super happy with the way that it came out. You can see the claws really came to life. After taking a well photographed image of it, you can see all the details and the color saturation as it is. And anyways, I hope that you like this voiceover tutorial. It's the first one that I've done, and hopefully I will be doing more in the future. If you'd like to help support my channel so that I can do more things like this in the future, you can head over to my Patreon page. Anyways, be sure to subscribe. If you have any questions about this piece or processes or techniques or anything like that, be sure to ask in the comments. I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can. I also have a weekly video series called The Drawing Journal, where you can ask questions and I will answer them on video. I'll show you techniques. I do a lot of basic tutorials in there and answer questions, so feel free to ask anything you want, and I will see you next time. Take care. Peace.